And the topic we're discussing today is, are freight brokers needed? Because we hear the comments. Sometimes we get comments in the comments section and they're talking about freight brokers saying that there's no need for a freight broker. Carriers can go direct to shippers and eliminate the freight broker. The freight brokerage's service is a waste. Now, I think the first thing that we have to do is find out where that narrative is coming from. What's the source of that narrative? Now, it could be because you've had some carriers that have had bad experiences with freight brokers. Or you have some carriers who feel like freight brokers are taking too much of the pie. You have some carriers that are frustrated because of the things that they deal with some freight brokers. That's understandable, but it is frustration. It does not mean that the service is not needed, because what determines whether the service is needed or not? When we really start to think about it, what determines that? Let's look at it from a supply and demand structure. If there's a product, if there's a service, then there has to be demand for that product or service in order for there to be a product or service that you can at least sell anyway. There has to be demand. There has to be a customer that says, I see enough value in this product or service to pay for it and to continue to pay for it. Once that's determined, then you can build a business around that interest that that customer has. That's how a business works. That's how a business comes into existence. That's how a business earns money. He has to have a customer who wants his product or service enough, sees enough value in it. It has to solve the customer's problem, and the customer says yes and pays for it. That's what determines whether there's a need or not. So because you get upset or you get frustrated and you say it's not needed, then that's something you're saying out of frustration. But that doesn't address the overall need of the market, because the market has already determined that there's a need for the broker. Now, if there were enough drivers, carriers, and shippers saying that same thing, and not only saying it, but acting on what they're saying and not using the service, then there's no value and the service is not needed. But upon decades and decades and decades, a freight broker service has been determined to be needed by this industry. Whether we like that or not, it doesn't matter whether you like it, whether you agree with it. The question is, what does the market say? We can get caught up in things sometimes based on we want it to be how we want it to be. But that's just our own internal thing. Because a lot of times it's not going to be how you want it to be. You have to make that adjustment sometimes. Or you have to make it how you want it. And again, making it that way is exercising, practicing what you preach. If you say there's no need for the freight broker, then you don't use the freight brokerage services. You cut the broker out. You don't pay that cost because you have enough expertise, enough knowledge to go out and get your own freight. Because at the end of the day, that's what a carrier uses a freight broker for, to obtain freight, to match his truck up with profitable freight. Easier to access freight through freight brokers than getting your own freight. Let's talk about why shippers use freight brokers, because you can sometimes, I think, look at a situation and look at it narrowly. and not really see the macro picture of why a service is actually needed. When I look at the freight brokerage service and what it provides to shippers, it basically brings calm to the storm. When you understand how the transportation industry is structured, you know that the vast majority of carriers are small carriers, carriers with 20 trucks or less. As a matter of fact, I think it's over 90% of the industry are even 6 trucks or less. So that would take a lot of coordination because there are so many fragmented moving parts within the transportation industry. A shipper could get overwhelmed with just trying to coordinate all of that freight movement between all of the different carriers themselves on a day in and day out basis. So what do? Well, they use freight brokers who provide a logistical service to meet the needs of shippers so they don't have to deal with all that comes with freight movement. They outsource that to freight brokers. So what has the freight broker done? He's identified a need, and he has a service that's the solution to the need of the shipper. He has a service that's the solution to the need of the carrier. And when you have a service or a product and it solves a problem for your customer, then they'll pay for it. So the market, supply and demand determines whether or not there's a need for a service. So get out of your frustration and say to yourself, either I'm going to use the service because I see value in it, or I'm not going to use the service because I don't see value in it. But just because you choose not to use it does not mean the vast majority of others don't see value in it. And as long as it's that way, as long as most truckers and most shippers see value in a freight brokerage services, then there will be value. And a freight broker will be able to capitalize on that. That's what I wanted to share with you today. If you want to learn more about the freight broker business, as usual, make sure you check the link, the description box for the link to the 5-video series. And that's a video series where I'll walk you through load movement, how load moves, how we talk to shippers and carriers. We're going to do it in a video, and it's showing me doing it so you can get a first-hand experience of how it works. And one last thing that I want to give you before I go. I'm partnered with TRUCKSTOP. That's the best load board in the business, in my opinion. I've been using it for over 8 years now. And I think that if you are in the market for a load board, there's not a better place that you can start than TRUCKSTOP, right? So I'm going to leave a link in the description box also that gives you a free month subscription to TRUCKSTOP if you use that link that's in the comment section. So take that as a gift from us, as a thank you for viewing the channel. So until the next time, I wish you the very best in your life and business. See you all the way at the top, because the bottom is much too crowded.